Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and today is August 4th, 2025, and it's release day. If you're new to this channel, we normally do tutorials and teach GMs how to do and build cool stuff for their VTT games, but release day is where me and my team release a whole bunch of new content for our Patreons, including like 2D maps and mapping components, and sometimes audio and animations and other fancy stuff, and also 3D maps and artwork plus dungeon draft stuff. So you can get all of this along with everything else we've ever produced for a single month of subscription. Okay, so while we have a ton of new Muddy assets for Foundry 2D subscribers, which you've seen here a little bit of, this month is particularly interesting for both subscribers to our dungeon draft content, but also our 3D content. Okay, so dungeon draft users are getting yet another new free mod. Building on top of the two I highlighted last month, but this one was an idea that I had that the mod developer took and ran with. It's called Convert Objects to Patterns. And while that may sound boring, I promise you it's not. And you can check out my full tutorial that came out today on the topic, which I'll link in the video description. And then for the 3D subscribers, we had a lot come together this month for you. Not only do you get some pretty outstanding new scenes, but also some new modular dungeon props. But you also get a new and improved 3D scene browser, which has these large square thumbnails. It's just a really great browsing experience to look at all of our 3D scenes, which there are quite a few of. And on top of all of our optimization work has dropped the size of the 3D module by, I think, over 300 megabits. So not bad, right? Okay, so just to clarify, we are still waiting for Iron Monk to get Matt working on V13. So any of our V13 stuff that uses Monk's active tiles that's not yet working, but really the majority of the Baileywiki assets do work for V13. And if you're already rocking V13, you want to try our stuff out, you can get a manual install link for the nuts and bolts module here in the video description. That should get you started. Okay, so that's the high level. Let's jump into the release. Okay, so Foundry users, to find the new stuff as usual, just update everything. You might want to update Towns by itself first, and then you can update everything else just because Towns is so big. Some of you can get hang-ups if you're trying to do it all at once. And then when you update nuts and bolts and you go into your macro browser, if you type in category, you will see 2D asset category browser, the 2D scene browser. You should now see the 3D scene, and you'll see an asset browser as well. You can import the ones that say import this, and you only ever have to do that once. Because once you have them imported, they call out the actual working ones that we update on a monthly basis. So once you've got them in your world like this, you can access them. So if I open up the scene browser, and I go to releases 2025, you'll have an August category and you'll see everything in the August release. And then for your main browser or your asset browser, same thing, 2025. In this case, I've got August already loaded, and you can see all of the prefabs up front, and then all of the virtual directory stuff is at the bottom, where you can turn the virtual directory off. This is just all the tiles that made this. There's also some sounds and some other things which we'll go through. Okay, so to start with the inventory scenes, this is all of your muddy terrain patches. So you've got one kind of big, these scale quite large, by the way. So you've got one big ruins. The rest of these are these muddy patches with kind of feathered edges in certain places so that they can merge together. As you've seen, they work really well with all the other kinds of terrain and diorama patches. We also have unlimited terrain spawners that these can go on top of. So there's lots of different ways to use these textures. But after you get through all of these, you've also got some slightly larger ones. Instead of forests, we just made stalagmite forests, if you will. So these help fill a role of a forest edge or things like that that you need to make. They're good for if you're making caves, which we'll see some examples. You've got some larger pieces like this, which kind of wraps around to this cave in the middle. You can decorate this with all sorts of stuff from the rest of the release. And then you've got some other kind of composite pieces that you might find some use for. It's just some of these mud slicks that you can throw onto different scenes. And then we've got this extended diorama piece in case you want to wrap something maybe in a longer format and not have to worry about any transitions or anything. So on top of those will come all of these decor pieces, right? So you've got different boulders, you've got these muddy caves that can drop in and serve as transition points if you want to make walls like as if you are navigating a cave. These can serve as transition points like doors. All of these muddy piles also serve as the textures for the new macro overlay, which I'll show you here in a second. And then we've also got, you can't see them here, and maybe I'll fix this for the release. Here, I made it more visible for you. You also have all these muddy footprints, and these come as individual tiles. These are semi-transparent, so they're hard to grab when you've got pixel perfect on, but they're just mirrored versions of themselves. Then you have these ones that have multiple set up together, and these are also set up as brushes. So if you look up footprint and you see that it's a brush, if you go to brush and you make sure it's not on randomize, then you can literally just walk, create steps, and you can hold down Control or Shift to rotate them, and you can build um, paths really easily with these. So, and you can mix multiple together if you want to make more than one, but there's different kinds of muddy footprints and just footprints that can go on any terrain. We also have some muddy rivers. These are tileable, so you can make these overlay textures. I didn't attempt to do that in this case, but I did include them in case you want me to do that in the future. We have these muddy cave prefabs. So these are made with lots of the pieces that we've done already. We just prefabricated them together. So if you just want to have like a bunch of skeletons in a cave or some other components that you might just want to throw down just for easy decor, you've got them here. We've got all of these muddy weapons in different degrees of having mud around them. Remember, you can always change the tint and you can always use the adjust filter. So if you open up your Baileywiki TMFX macro, you can use the adjust filter. This one has pre-built lower saturation in it, but once you apply it, you can see it changes the color. That lets you merge these in with lots of different kinds of scenes. If I open up the editor, you can see I can change that back, or I can give it higher saturation. This is how I created a yellow ochre effect, which I'll show you here in a little bit. If I take blue down to 0, and maybe I increase gamma a little bit, you can see I start to get a yellowing effect. Pretty cool stuff. I'm going to delete that from there. I'll go over here first, and then we'll come back to the ruins. So we also have all these muddy skeletons. These are built to merge with this environment or other environments. Again, you can recolor them as you need to using the adjust filter. All of the different stalagmites that you can link together, including some long ones. If you want to create like just instant walls or barriers, you can do that. You've got these muddy path wood boards. Now these are also in a brush, and the brush already has like the opacity changed on these. So just like muddy path, you'll see these boards here. If you go into brush, this time we do want to have randomize turned on. You can create paths really easily with this, right? Really flexible. And these are slightly, the opacity slightly lessened so that they merge into whatever background that you're putting them on. They merge easier. And then you've got some really long versions just in case you don't want to construct whole long pieces yourself, and some other versions of those. Okay, so as far as the muddy ruins go, just got lots of different kinds of ruins. They merge super well with all of the assets that we just deployed. You even have an entire like wall system, so all these different walls that you can butt them up together, or you can have them separated so that you have places for your players to go. But there's nothing on these that imply any major scale, except maybe you want the staircase to be large enough for a player to be able to get onto. But you can really move these around as much as you want, resize them. You can uh, mirror them vertically and horizontally just by pressing H and F. Remember, I hit Shift D to enter that preview mode, and that's what it lets you manipulate those. These are also, I think they come as brushes. Lots of other pieces that are kind of ready to go. You can just drop them in to your scenes to help build out some kind of, former or current occupant type area. This one's got this skeleton. You can make this smaller. It can necessarily be a large skeleton coming out of the middle. Just some stuff to help give you guys some inspiration. And then we also have some audio loops. Most of these are from Michael Gelfi. I don't think technically they all are, but if we hover over them, got a ooze explosion, gurgling bubbles. Here's a muddy elemental. This is from Michael Gelfi. This is just a great sound. I've got this hooked up to something here in a second. I'll show you. And then you've got this muddy ooze dungeon, and then one that's torch lit. I have this generally serving as the nighttime audio, but you guys can play around with this. Now I have most of those, or many of those, hooked into another random cave sound tile. In this case, this is Monk's Active Tiles driven. So right now this works in V12. Um, hopefully this will work automatically with V13 when Monk gets done with his work. But it calls as a player moves through this, any tokens, it has a random chance of calling some of those sounds that you just heard. So you can put one of these in a scene and you can have players just sort of, just by their natural movement through the scene, trigger some of that stuff. Now, these are not our assets, but I did include them. These require the JB2A animations module. I just really like them. They go super well with the assets that I just showed you. If I drop this in here, it merges well and you can have this kind of magical effect. So if you're curious if this doesn't load when you load the scene, it means you're missing the JB2A module, and you can see this happens to be the Patreon. So if you want it, you do have to be on the Patreon module. This one I think is the free one, so you can check it out and decide which ones that you're willing to get. But JB2A does some awesome stuff. If you want tons of animations, they're the place to go. Okay, and so last but not least, we've got this new macro that makes things muddy. So it's called the overlay mud 01 randomized macro. And there's also a TMFX randomizing filter. So if you agreed to the prompt to import the custom filters, you can actually find it here if we search for mud. And this muddy effect will randomly apply a muddy effect. Let me see if I can show you an example of that. We'll just use one of these boards and we'll apply the effect. And if we keep clicking it, you can't see it here, but it's randomly moving around that mud effect. So that mud effect has been applied and you can kind of see it. Better though to show you on bigger objects. So that's been applied here to this rock, right? So it's applied this mud effect. If I click that again, and here I'll just use the macro itself, you can see it can rotate around the mud and it just shows it's built to expose some of the artwork, but still show mud on it, right? I did the same thing here. You can cover tokens with it. Here we've got a kind of a two-piece statue. I've applied it to both the base and the top of the statue. And here I've applied it to the top of a hut roof, right? Just to show you that you can kind of make anything muddy. This is just to help you use anything else in the library or anything else from other artists that you use to give them the same kind of mud effect and help merge them into, one of these scenes that you might be building. We also have a lot of tileable patterns. These are going to be really helpful for you with the terrain spawners. When you drag the terrain spawner out, let's look for muddy spawner. If you drag this out onto a scene, it will open up the folder with all of these terrains in it. And you'll notice you do have different sizes. These are thumbnails, the ones that say 300 by 300. You may actually want to use the thumbnails in some cases. Maybe you don't need high density, but for the most part, you're going to use these larger ones, these 4Ks. And these are all tileable, so they will tile across the whole scene. You can see this just like all of the other train spawners that we've got. And if you go to your token level, again, you have to be on V12 because this is token magic effects driven. Although V13, I think we're going to change that. We're going to take this stuff in-house so you won't need it for V13. But if we change the overlay, you can do that, or you can adjust the position and you can randomly pick a new position, zoom in, and you've got a new map base to start with. These are mostly just textures, and then these are more like fully merged and using a lot of different assets. So you get different kinds of terrain, and it really can make very different maps depending on which area you're zoomed into, right? So, this might be a very different map than something like that. and it automatically rotates it. So you kind of get something new every time. And this one's got some ruins built into it. It's got some footprints. And again, you can grab other, right? So you can adjust these once you've placed them by putting other assets on them. And then these diorama tiles, they all change too, right? So if I double click this, it will randomly change the diorama tile. Maybe I like that. Maybe I like this big kind of muddy indentation and I want to kind of stick it right. Maybe I want to cover that ruin, right? And I've just changed my map by doing that. Okay, so now let's look at the template scenes that all those assets go into. As you're used to seeing, this is a single diorama template. You can double click it and randomize through all the different options. You can also click this thing. This will randomize every diorama template that's in the scene all at the same time. And the reason we have that is because you can double these things up, right? I can have two of these. And let's say I want to drag this free just so I don't accidentally activate the other ones. And let's double click that. And it randomizes both. And so you put a few of these on a scene and you can really quickly get, something brand new. You get to kind of discover some design things by doing that. This one has 5 templates altogether. So if I move this around, you can see I've got 4 more underneath it. And this just shows you, we left it here so you can kind of see how you can use these as sort of barriers, these stalagmite versions, but you can just double click this and it would randomize everything else. You can also change these. So if I double right click and I say, look, I don't want that to be muddy. I want to use maybe more of the desolate stuff. I can deselect muddy, choose desolate, and it will then randomize in those categories instead. This is just a regular scene. It doesn't tile, but it's just got some pieces that you can just add things to. So if you like this idea of a giant skeleton with a shield and its hand coming out kind of buried or it's submerged in the mud, and you've got this sort of natural bridge created between these kind of 2 mud sinkholes, and you've got some skeletons over here, that can be a starting point for another scene. And I'll show you a scene that uses this as a starting point. This is the Muddy Plateau, same thing. It doesn't tile. It's just set up with some plateaus to give you some nice sort of instant elevation. You can build a town here, just a simple battle. Like literally you don't have to do anything except just drop your tokens in and fight. And then we've got this one also, just muddy ruins. Again, just ruins that you can just drop tokens into and start battling, or you can make adjustments to this. Again, not tileable. Now, when we get to the unlimited templates, that's where you have that unlimited terrain already pre-built into it. If you double click it, you can change the overlay, adjust the position. You can even change the size of the scene. I can shrink it, grow it, and then once you've changed the size, just select that tile because it won't resize automatically, and then you can use the fit tile to scene macro, which you can find in Nuts and Bolts. So you can really resize these unlimited templates, reshape them, and really kind of randomly discover your next to new map. So, between all of the templates you see here, you've got thousands of, probably millions of combinations of maps. So you can really go nuts. Okay, now we can look at some of the scenes we've created from those templates. And that's how I do my design. I create the templates. And then from the templates, I create all of these scenes that you see here. So this one was created using the 5X template. So these are actually 4 diorama template sitting underneath this main one in the middle. I wanted to make some kind of arena that's all muddy and gross, and you've got skeletons that are submerged and weapons that are lying around. You've got these like metal pieces, which are really just tinted components from other releases that we've had. And you can turn this into a night scene. And by the way, there is ambient audio for day and night. And here, your players can battle it out in this large arena. And maybe it's all difficult terrain, or maybe you want to define certain areas as difficult terrain. And you can do that with the regions and things like that, or just leave it like it is and don't try to over-engineer it. Here's a muddy cave scene. This is just combining some of the elements to have your players have something that they can navigate through. You've got some certain natural barriers, you've got things they might discover, and this is just to show you how you can link these things together. Here's some, ruin that was just dropped into the top to have them discover something there. A couple of those footprint paths that we created earlier. By the way, if you find that the footprints are too dark, you can adjust their opacity. So you see this opacity is about 65%. The brushes themselves automatically adjust the opacity down. but you can do it further. And remember, if you want to adjust them all at once, and you've already placed them, because of Mass Edit, you can just press Shift F, and you can find everything in this folder. I'll just put a wildcard there, and you can say Search and Edit, and it will automatically select all of those, and you can change their opacity right here. So if I wanted it to be like 50%, I could do that, and it'll change them all at the same time. Really handy stuff. That's free with Mass Edit. Here's a muddy cave, but it's an insect layer, so I'm using some of the insect releases from a couple releases ago. And you've got some animal bones. These are all tinted to match the mud. I'm just giving you guys some design options here. And you've got some of the, like animated assets. So these are just really great and gross. Some flies buzzing. You've got some some sound beacons there. And then I also did something interesting with these eggs. You notice how these are slowly glowing? Well, that's because they have a filter applied to them, Token Magic Effects filter. If we go into the Edit filter, we can see it's the bloom filter, and we can see on the animated side that it's going between these values of 0 and 2, and that's what gives you that subtle animated effect, really, without having to do anything else. I actually started that with the lava glow effect. This is how I made lava glow in other releases. So if you want to copy that, you can use this as your starting point and then adjust some of the values to make it do that. This one's really fun. It's the Muddy Ochre Pit. And we used sort of a base diorama tile. We dropped in one of the muddy ones underneath it, but then we applied that filter that I showed you before, the adjustment filter. I can open it up, and I can look at the values, right? So red is higher, green is higher, blue is 0, gamma's at 2, and that gives you this nice bright yellow effect. Well, I took that same filter and I applied it to these elementals. By the way, these are part of the release. I didn't put them, maybe I'll put them into the inventory scene. But these little mud elementals, if I right click it, I go into the folder, you can see there's 3 of these. Just wanted to give you guys some ready-made monsters. You'll have to connect these with something in your world. So right now they're not connected to an actor. The actor would be in your sidebar. So you'd have to import whatever creature would be your mud elemental, and then you can associate these tokens with that actor, or you can just associate these as the prototype token. Here's like a big one, right? And it can go inside of this cave, right? So you can have one or more elementals kind of hiding in the cave. But it just shows you how flexible the system is to say, hey, look, I just want to create this like ochre infested area of this forest or along this path. And you're just using the assets with some different filters applied to it. The Muddy Ruin has some FX Master weather applied, as you can see, and some bats flying around. We've got our path going through the middle, and then different areas that your players can explore or fight from, right? Again, just mashing things together to show you how you can do this yourself. And then the Muddy Tavern, this just uses one of those kind of starting template scenes. We've put some kind of wild brush around. We've got some paths and some staircases leading up to this upper area. Maybe you put a campfire there in the middle. And then this is an actual working tavern. So if we go to levels, let's get our levels from the map. Here we go. And you can see there's a whole interior to this tavern, and there's lights, and you've got the light and dark version of this map as well. There's not really any lights out here. They're sort of all in the tavern, but you can add more torches and things like that depending on how you want to light your scene. The Stalagmite Forest, if I grab a token here, you can see that they can navigate around, and you can have some interesting encounters, or they might be running around looking for something. You've got kind of torches around these different areas. And I always forget where I put this. You have a reveal here, so they can click this and reveal a treasure box, or as you know, if you've had my content for a while, you can right click this and change it to something else. Pool of water, skeleton, a hole, maybe it takes you somewhere. You can make it empty, but put an object there that appears when they click on it using Monk's Active Tile. So you can really have this reveal, call it a floor reveal. You can have it be anything that you want. And you can find those floor reveals just by typing reveal, for example, and you can get all these different ones. Here's one in ice. Here's one on a tiled floor. So you can check these out, and they work great. Just dropping them into scenes to make something discoverable. Those were mostly diorama scenes. These are scenes that were made with other technologies. This one is a path coming up to this bridge. This bridge is got mud applied to it. You can see it's got the overlay. This tile happens to be locked, so you can't move it. If you want to unlock a tile, by the way, you just right-click it and you click the lock symbol. You move that around. Players can make a way across the bridge. This is a multi-story tower, so they can come up to the top, or enemies can be up there shooting them. And you've just got some other pieces from some other sets, just to make it look like the side of the bridge is a little bit more occupied. Maybe this is a defensive bridge for some reason. And it's got daytime as well. This is the muddy bridge. We added some stone pillars, we added some muddy overlays, and you can see you just quickly add pieces and make them feel like they are part of the scene. These pillars are overhead pillars. They were tinted just a bit, just picking up one of the colors from here. And when your players move through it, it really feels like it's got 3 dimensions, right? So they can walk under this pillar. And down here there's a hand that you can go under, right? So maybe there's something that you're hiding under here. Maybe that's an entrance somewhere, I don't know. To give you guys some inspiration. And then finally, this muddy village. Just wanted to create a village that, in case there's a settlement that you want to discover, does have this working bonfire in the middle. It has day and nighttime scenes, right, which sound like a village. These are all facades, except for this is a working tower, but these are mostly all facades, meaning they don't have interiors. You can just delete this facade and put in an actual hut that has an interior, depending on what you're looking for. And we've got lots of different kinds of huts, right? So we just look up hut. We have grocers and bordellos, and these are all various sizes, right? So shipwrights and taverns. Different kinds of huts that your players can live in. So just keep in mind there's a lot of options there. Plus you can use any buildings that don't have a hut top, and maybe they stand out, or maybe you give them a hut roof. There's a lot of flexibility here. But just a little town for your players to explore. So that's it for the 2D release. Now I'm going to hand it to Swift to talk about the 3D stuff.
Hi guys, Swift here again to talk about this month's 3D update. Today we've got a set of maps by myself and Letters, a set of assets to make some prefab dungeons with, an update to the map browser, and coming soon in the next month we're going to be getting the asset browser on the go as well, thanks to some back-end improvements. Speaking of back-end improvements, those same things will see a reduction in the size of the Baileywiki 3D module this month. It should be roughly 300 megabytes smaller now, with no visible change in any of our assets, and also no change required in any of the maps that you've created in the past, or that we've created. So let's start off by having a quick look at some of these maps. These first couple, I will admit, were inspired by the recent release of Draw Steel, which is a TTRPG by MCDM Studios. If you haven't heard of it, I definitely suggest going and having a look. It's a heroic fantasy RPG that will be very familiar to anyone who's played D&D or Pathfinder or anything before. But anyway, the first adventure that comes with it involves a certain tomb, and thus includes things like a map with an approach to the tomb. So I thought I'd give it a go and make a few last-minute maps just to kind of facilitate those adventures in 3D. So to start with, this is the tomb approach. The general idea here is that the players will be approaching this building in the background here, and it looks like a kind of mausoleum thing, but inside is just some stairs that lead down into the dungeon proper. What this encounter is actually about is going to be the goblins or other guardians of the crypt that will be hiding out behind these walls around the back, or even behind the trees, and they'll ambush the players as they approach. Overall, it's a fairly simple map. What I've done is set up just a nice exterior with the dynamic sky, so you see the clouds and so on are slowly drifting across the sky, as well as using some of the background trees that we've had in the pack for a little while now. Those are extremely low poly trees that are designed to be used as background fluff, basically. So they look okay as a background piece, but obviously they'd be kind of too low detail to really be used in the scene, but that's what we've got these proper trees for. Anyway, this map here is quite straightforward, but since I was making use of the dynamic sky, I thought I'd also make a night version, since the nighttime dynamic sky is not something I use very often at all, despite the fact that it looks fantastic. So this is basically a similar idea, but obviously the heroes have approached the tomb at night for whatever reason. We've got a starry sky up above. You can obviously tweak how much cloud coverage there is, so you can have it just full stars or full clouds if you prefer. By the way, the lighting's been tweaked, so we've got kind of a dark blue kind of vibe to it. The idea here, of course, is that your players will probably be bringing light sources of their own, so if you attach light sources to their tokens, then that will kind of lead to, hopefully, an interesting interaction in lights in the middle here, which is where the fight's probably going to happen. Anyway, once they've dealt with that encounter, they'll probably want to move into the crypt itself, so let's have a look at that. This is a setup that might look familiar to people who are familiar with tombs made by MCDM. It's sort of a remix of the Delian Tomb that they've got with their Delian Tomb starter kit, or start here kit, as they're calling it. Overall, it's a bit of a different layout, but the beats are very similar. We've got a descent down into a corridor that leads to this offering room that's being used as a bivouac for goblins, by default anyway. You could obviously put whatever you like in here. From here, we follow on to a nice long corridor, just to kind of separate the rooms out a bit. And this leads into this central room here, where they're conducting a ritual to sacrifice the blacksmith's daughter or niece or whoever it happens to be. I've used the projection object, which is something that is, I think, underutilized. These are basically, if you use this button here on the side for effects, these are like effects you can drag out onto a scene, and then they'll just be projected down onto the floor or whatever other surface you like, and then you can give them all sorts of effects to make them look like various different things. Anyway, in this case, we've got a magic circle in the middle here that's got a bit of a flame effect to give it a bit of a flicker, and it's also slowly rotating even, because I think a bit of movement really adds to it. But obviously you don't want to put too much movement because it's not like this is trying to whirl around or anything. So just a little bit of a subtle clue there. In the back, we've got the traditional statue of the knight standing up on the plinth, and then the secret door behind them that slides open to reveal a passageway deeper inside. And then back along here, we have a rather large chamber with a massive pool of water surrounded by more of these statues here. It's a bit of an interesting twist on the Delian Tomb from the original video by Matt, but this is a rather expanded one for their brand new TTRPG. Anyway, that's those maps to do with this new Draw Steel that's come out. Let's have a look at the rest of the maps. And this next one is another one of mine. It's a bit of a comeback of these ancient canal pieces that I haven't used in years, but in this case it is just a kind of reimagining of an older idea of like a cave or a sewer system under a city with various rooms off the side of it that people have been using for various activities, legal and otherwise, with cave water, or well, sewer water I suppose, that looks as unhealthy as is appropriate, I think. And then of course the twist with this one is that we've got a breach into the sewers from this cave here, using the rooms tool that comes with 3D canvas to create a kind of secret altar worship area. So this was kind of just another look at an older idea and a more modern use of these canal pieces that I'm rather fond of from the distant past. Pretty simple map overall. I generally tend to like kind of dark dungeon maps, especially with a bit of lighting, like this torch here, really illustrating like the damaged state of the floor here, just by highlighting all of these loose and missing bricks. Anyway, that's the maps that I've made this month. Let's have a look at Lettuce's maps. This first one by Lettuce is the Random House, which I think is a really quaint-looking style map, I think. It's just a really nice, kind of simple house they got set up here. And they've used a solution that I don't think I've seen used before for how to actually show the inside of the house once someone goes inside. You've got a door that opens, of course, and then that's got things inside. But once someone actually steps inside, parts don't go invisible. You can just click on the roof, and it moves up out of the way, up in the air there. And then you can see inside the building from above. So this is a really simple dwelling here. We've just got 2 rooms, several beds laid out, tables, that sort of thing. So it really is the kind of house that could be used by a wide variety of people. My first thought with all the furs and stuff is poachers, of course, but that's just because of the stuff I've been reading lately. It's another one of those very useful for various reasons types of maps. And overall pretty cute, I think. Let's have a look at the next one. This one's called the Swamp Encounter Gaseous Cross, and there's a good use of the particle systems that you can attach to lights in 3D canvas. In this case here, we've got a house out on a swamp, and then several pits, perhaps craters, holes in the ground, where green fog is emerging from and spreading out across the ground over the water. Not the kind of place that you probably want to spend very long in. The house is likely abandoned. It was probably built before this place was quite so wet, and overall the place now looks rather unhealthy. But a pretty cool encounter map, especially for any sort of disease or poison-themed enemies. Anyway, let's have a look at the next one. And here's another swamp encounter map. This one's just called The Bank, as it is the bank of the swamp, or the bank of a river through the swamp, rather. We've got a sort of either cave-looking entrance, or perhaps just a den of some sort of creature. An ancient house that's just about to fall over, most likely, or maybe it was under construction. And then these strange fungal-looking growths across the rest of the hill here. And up on this side of the map is a much higher elevation from the side down there. Overall, a pretty straightforward map, I think, but pretty straightforward is good in my book. A nice kind of diagonal coast sort of map. This is another one by Lettuce, the Village Encounter. In this case, the 3-way street. It's a map that I quite like, conceptually, because it's a sort of more built-up urban sort of area, but it's more built up in that kind of fantasy-ish, medievalish sort of way, where all the buildings seem like they were just constructed on top of each other almost, closer and closer and closer together, until you just ended up with these narrow streets. And so we've got this T-shaped junction here, with a few little back areas around the side, nice bit of greenery on there. But overall, I quite like this just for that general notion of having an encounter in a T-junction here. So you could either have the party coming from below and being ambushed from both sides, or coming in and trying to get past someone that's blocking the road, that sort of thing. Overall, a very flexible little map. And this village encounter is just called the Crop Fields, for probably obvious reasons. It's another very straightforward one. We've got this straight-ish road to the middle here that's at quite a low elevation, and then these crop fields on either side, with a fence in between, of course. We've got these tall plants on this side that potentially could be used as cover by people, and the sort of lower ones on this side that, well, I suppose they could all be used as cover. Either way, a good spot for an ambush, I think, or indeed a running battle across the fields. But anyway, simple but effective. I think that's what this map is. And this one is the Village Encounter Windmill. And I think this one is pretty cute, actually. Just as like a little standalone piece here, we've just got this windmill with the blades slowly spinning. We've got the crop fields down below it. We've got the cart of supplies. And then we've got the door on there as well, that obviously leads through into there. The way these are made, by the way, is using the splat map shader here, which just allows you to paint on things like roads or dirt or grass or whatever onto your maps. This is another one that I think is, like I say, very, very cute, very aesthetically pleasing. I don't know if you'd have a combat encounter on this map, because it is quite small, but obviously this would be a good interlude scene of the party approaching this windmill and then entering into it, to then go to a different scene, presumably. Alright, that's the maps. Let's have a quick look at the assets this month. And the assets this month are a whole load more dungeon prefabs. So these are rooms in various shapes with various door arrangements. So we've got like 3-door ones, 2 doors, T-junction left, T-junction right, 4 doors, stairs, that sort of thing. And various sizes. So we've got like a 3x3 T-junction here, a kind of 5x5 L shape. One going left, one going right, since they're not really, they're mirrors of each other, basically. We've got a set of 5x10 rooms with the standard, like 1 door, 2 doors, going left, going right, T-junction kind of arrangement. And then we've got a few which have stairs in them, just to be kind of level ups or downs in any given dungeon, as well as things like this corridor stairway that you can just snap in wherever you like, and that'll just increase or decrease the level by 1. And then we've got things like this 3x3 room over here with the stairs, which are used in the Delian Tomb, for instance, as the entrance. I think it works really well as that. Overall, these pieces should be very efficient because they're all single objects. So you don't need to worry about combining things or having to worry about separate objects. So, for example, you could also use, say, the projectors on these, and they would show up fine, despite the fact that, say, this piece of floor and this piece of floor and this piece of floor are all different to each other. You'd just be able to project it down, no worries, it would just immediately work. And then these will snap together with the other prefab pieces we've had before, or the individual, like, one wall pieces we made a while ago, so that you should be able to quickly make dungeons using these sorts of things. Speaking of the asset as well, I mentioned we've had some improvements. We've saved around about 300 megabytes this month, just from basically redoing how we store information in the module itself. We've not changed anything like file names or where files are or anything. So if you're currently using the Baileywiki 3D module and you've made any maps or you're using any of our maps, you won't need to do anything because everything's, as far as 3D Canvas is concerned, everything's all the same. It'll just load a bit faster now. And also take up less of your space if you're using hosted solutions. Related to that, the scene browsers had a bit of a improvement. Now we have proper thumbnails for most of the scenes in here. These are, if you saw them last month, you would agree that these are a lot better. There's still going to be a couple of thumbnails that are a bit broken, like this one here, a couple of duplicates here, and then some missing maps. For example, March. There are supposed to be more than 2 maps here, for instance, but that's all mostly tagging, so that's something that we're just doing in the background that should hopefully be fixed by the time you get this. But basically, the map browser is now looking much nicer. Like, for example, if you go into Dungeon and then Stone, say, you'll get, like I said, a couple of thumbnails are still broken, we'll deal with those. But mostly now, thumbnails are much more visible, much more clear. You can really see what each map is, hopefully, is the idea. And then when you hover over them, you should be able to see, I don't know if that's coming up in the capture, but you should see the map, the name of the map, as well as the tags that the map has. And then you can also search with tags up here. So now the scene browser is much, much closer to being fully complete and polished to a mirror shine. It's already usable. It should be in a slightly better state than what you see now when you get it in now, I suppose, when you're hearing this. And hopefully that will just be improved going forward. Relatedly, we're doing the same thing for the 3D asset browser, which is the similar sort of idea. It's going to be menus with categories of assets that you can then go into subcategories of assets. So you can search for, say, all trees or all tables, that sort of thing. And that's a bit of a bigger undertaking because we've got a lot of assets in the pack, and basically we need to go through each one and give them tags, which is a very large bit of work to do. But once we get it to a useful level, then we'll give it to you guys to use, obviously. And then as we go on, we'll just add more and more tags. It'll become more and more accurate as we go. The end result, hopefully, is that you'll have a scene and you'll think, okay, I really need this specific object now. You'll be able to just open up the Baileywiki asset browser and type in something that you need, like a bookcase, and then you'll just get a list of bookcases right there in the browser. So that's the plan. Something we're actively working on as we speak. For now, though, that's what we've got this month. I think I'm actually most excited about just the map browser looking so much nicer now. As ever, questions, comments, and all that are greatly appreciated. So if you leave them a comment down below or on our Discord, I'd greatly appreciate that. I'll see you guys later.
Okay, Dungeon Draft users. So before I start, remember I did a full tutorial on this, but we're using a new mod. And this is one that's an idea that I had that the mod developer and I have been collaborating on. But the mod is called Convert Object into Pattern. So there's a whole thing about this and a whole tutorial I recommend you see because it's super powerful. Just as a quick tutorial, I'm going to make a copy of this piece. I'm going to bring it to level 300 just so it's in front of everything. And as I have it selected, I'm going to say Change Object to Pattern. Doesn't look like anything happened, but in reality, if I go to my Pattern tool, Edit Points, you can see this hitbox around there. If I change this, I can get rid of some of the artwork that I don't want. Maybe I want it just like that. And now, because I have another mod that does this from the same developer, if I select it, that pattern, and I say enable edge blur, you can see it blurs the edges and it makes it so this asset becomes integratable with anything else underneath it. So I can go back to my edit points and I can make some fine-tune adjustments. But in this way, this mod lets you kind of isolate any texture you like and then use it to merge with anything else. It's very, very powerful. And we used it to make a lot of the assets that we did this month. So besides the stalagmites, you've got the caves and everything else. You've got all of your muddy terrain patches. So with all of the kind of faded edges, so they merge really well with each other. Lots of really good, wet textures, just really love it. We've got the stalagmite patches to serve as kind of a forest, right? If you want to create stalagmite barriers, you've got those. And some other kind of composite. This one's long. This one actually also comes as a path, which we'll show you here in a second. These different muddy, we call them just muddy terrains. It's just like little mud slicks you can add to your maps. And then you've got lots of patterns. So these actually come as high as 4K, and that's so that you can make them really large without creating too much repeatability. They come both as patterns and as terrains, but because we have the ability to fade the edges of patterns, you don't have to use them as terrains anymore. You can get a lot of flexibility just, let's bring this to the front, just putting terrains together and blurring their edges and making them so that they can merge easily. We've got all these muddy footprint paths, which are super nice to work with, right? So let's go to level 300. And if we search for muddy, we can find all the different paths that we've got. And let's get this down to a normal size. Oops. And we can draw footpaths through everything. Because we can recolor all of these things, you can also drop their opacity, right? So I can drop their opacity and it really helps them kind of merge in depending on, where you're trying to put them. Lots of these also come as objects too, just so you know, so you can manually build your footpaths. You've also got your plank paths of different varieties. These are also super nice and helpful, so you don't have to manually create them, but these also come as objects that you can manually put together. These muddy river paths are super helpful, especially because they scale so large. So you can really have this muddy river kind of coming through a scene as kind of as big as you want. Stalactite or stalagmite path, also super helpful. And the Muddy Ruins wall path, again, very nice. You can these are also good for just framing a scene. Like, hey, I just want to have like a huge wall on one side and, my town is kind of up against the wall, right? You can make these certainly smaller, but they go with some of the other objects that were released. And you've got all your muddy skeletons. Try to keep these the same scale for the most part, except for this big face, just because we wanted to be able to let you zoom in, have it be really large on your scenes. Remember, you can recolor these to some degree using all the mods that we've got available now. All of your muddy cave weapons. Here's your manual paths to put together, or your manual objects to put together your footprints or your plank paths. All of these different prefabs that come with the artwork already integrated into it. So you can just slap those in if you want to just kind of have instant detail. Here's all your ruins, which I showed you before. These are super helpful using the new object patterns mod that I just showed you, because you can isolate any component of these and build these composite ruins, which we can show you here in a second. Here's just some of the pieces, how they were made. Here's how this longer piece was made. You can see it's using some of the fading pattern technology we've got available now. Here's the composite ruin. You just kind of see how these were all kit bashed together to ultimately make pieces for the rest of the release. Here's just how we made some of these scenes. You can come in here and deconstruct them, see where we used all these patterns and things to create fades and to merge stuff together properly. Same thing here. A lot of patterns used. This is really great, right? So this is a tileable pattern that came with this release. You can cover areas of detail because maybe you want these to merge better. You want to create more of a path, more of a visual path that people can understand, right? So that's what helps you do that, right? So you can benefit from having all this instant detail, but then you can quickly cover the detail where you don't want it. So it's much faster to take detail away, even if you're just covering it, masking it with something else, than to try to create this level of detail in Photoshop yourself, right? So this is just an example of how you can create these things um, together. And you can come here and see like how we kit bashed all this stuff together, make some modifications yourself, deconstruct how all these were made, seeing where paths and objects were used. This is the wall system. These actually, I didn't mention this and I didn't have this on the inventory, but there's actually a wall, Muddy Ruins wall. And if you use it, it will automatically put a cap at the end of the wall. That's how all of these were made. And that lets you create scenes where you've got these gaps kind of naturally made. Now, what it's not good for is like a right turn. See how it gets all weird? Even if I have beveled corners turned on, it doesn't handle right turns very well. So what you want to do is use more curves, right? So if I curve that turn, this is a lot more forgiving of based on, Dungeon Draft's limitations. But anyway, it is available as a wall, not just a path, so you can create stuff like this. These are also then objects. And then you can just see some other kit bash pieces, which we felt like we needed in the library. And that's it. Hopefully you guys have fun making new stuff with this release, and you can see how flexible it is now that we've got this new mod specifically to help us do that. And so with that, let's go to close this thing out. Okay, gang, thanks for walking through this release with me. We're already at work on some great stuff for next month, including what we're calling the Gray Harbor. It's a decidedly haunted set of dock and harbor assets. But please let me know in the comments what you liked about this release, if you've got any questions about it, any feedback on it, or if you have any ideas or suggestions for what we should do in the future. And in the meantime, thanks everybody for supporting this channel, and of course, have fun making your maps.